everyone, and welcome to the Buck Stops here. I am Catherine Murray. Well, in today's program, we are going to focus on the markets, and as we know, it has been a very volatile start to the year, and including this week as well. Markets seem to feel a little bit better, but we're talking today on a day where the Dow is down once again. So let's get some great perspective from Thomas George. He has 20 years of experience on the institutional investment side. He was the head of resource investment and ESG at TD Asset Management. He was the lead PM for TD's resource fund, energy fund, and precious metals funds. We're going to get some perspective from him, and including what he's doing today, which is his launch of Grizzle ETF, GRZZ, on the NASDAQ, with a real focus on disruptive growth. Thomas, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So I want to first have you describe a little bit about what Grizzle is. It's a great name. I love it. It's very catchy.
Yeah.
For someone who's been in banking, for 20 years, I don't know how you came up with it, but talk to us a little bit about what it is and what you're doing with the CTF GRZ, because we're going to talk all about your investment themes and thinking and where you think people should really be placing their money today.
Yeah, so the genesis of Grizzle, and thank you. We love the name too, and we said, listen, we're gonna get that .com. If we're gonna own this, we're gonna own it right. So yeah, 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago, we started Grizzle, and our focus was on millennial thematic research. The focus was the world was changing. We knew it was changing, and we knew we could cover it in a more dynamic way than, traditional banks and et cetera, right? And so that's how we started. Cannabis was our core first focus. We were the first to cover Beyond Meat, and we've been covering all the big technology IPOs. And ultimately, the culmination of all of that is the launch of the GRZZ ETF. That was just launched at end of last year. So it's really our view is that disruption is the new status quo in terms of an investing paradigm, but you got to do it right, and you got to do it at a reasonable price.
Right. So doing it right is difficult for sure, and reasonable prices as well. And you really call it disruptive growth, or DARP?
Yeah. So disruptive growth at a reasonable price, DARP. So that, that's what we employ, and it's a dynamic way to look at it. Obviously, there's a behemoth in the industry in ARC Innovation, and we feel that they're an example of science fair growth, right? And so we can compare and contrast that to our world, which is we look at tangible growth, opportunities that are in the market today that aren't like flying taxis, that that don't require space travel, et cetera, right? That kind of thing.
And just so everybody knows, you said ARC. You mean Kathy Wood, ARC Investments. Exactly. She's kind of the number one name and headline out there in terms of being very forward thinking and focusing on technology. I think what you're trying to point out is that the road to profitability for some of her companies is maybe a decade out or more.
That's exactly right. And she's gotten a lot of calls really well. But at the same time, it's some of the other bets that I think challenge the entire portfolio and the volatility around. So their main flagship ARC Innovation ETF, it's got a stratospheric volatility, and that's one of the challenges with looking at disruption anywhere you can find it. But when you focus in on, I want to find disruptive opportunities that have cash flow inflection no more than 6 years out into the future, that then just changes the dynamic. It changes your risk parameters. And we think that is the sweet spot. We've done a ton of quantitative analytics around this. We're about to release a white paper about it. But this is really why we think the sweet spot is in that 4 to 6 year time frame, not that greater than 10 year.
Okay. And we're going to get into some of those themes, what they mean. But I do want to get your take, having, been in the traditional markets. We're still in the traditional markets, you are. But running resource funds, ESG funds, et cetera. Give me your one-liner in terms of the world right now.
Yeah. So the world right now, very specifically, we're in an era where all energy matters, right? It's going to be the dominant theme for the next decade. We're talking oil, gas, electric. Give it to me. We've come off 20 years of underinvestment in what the world needs. Like in Europe right now, they they're having an electricity crisis. I don't think we've ever been in a point to talk about that ever. And we think that you need to fix those problems. That's another 20 years of investment. It's one of the most dynamic investment themes going forward. And if you do it right, you set yourself up in a very good way.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back with Thomas George. Thomas, I want to pick up on what you just left us off with, which is, you've got to invest in energy. And that's not even what we're really talking about here. I mean, some of your investments obviously play into that theme, obviously.
Yeah.
But talk to us about what you are seeing, given your background in energy, and the electricity shortages in Europe.
Yeah, this is a dire situation. It really is. Let's scroll back 20 years, right? There were a lot of clean energy mandates, specifically renewable energy mandates, and then you overlap that, so that that's something that was happening. But we know with renewable energy, there's intermittency, right? So it can't be a base load. The functioning, we can always rely on it. So that's going to be a challenge with renewables. Fine, but then at the same time, you had a period where you said no more new nuclear. In fact, we're going to take nuclear offline, and no new coal. And you're not building natural gas fast enough. So you get to this crunch point where basically the grid is against the ropes. And when we think about it, that's not something you can change overnight. And when we think about the future, specifically, we know the world is looking to have a lower carbon path, no doubt. We don't subscribe to the view that it all magically just happens and, all we're using is renewables. We're not there yet. We know you need a bridge fuel, and that bridge fuel has to be natural gas. And so we think about it in a few different ways, but definitively it's going to be natural gas.
So walk us then through how you are using that theme and investing in it.
For sure. So we have strong natural gas exposure. So we own Shell is one of our top 5 holdings, and Shell's unique. So not only do they have a very attractive dividend yield of 4%, but more than that, they're 1 out of every 5 global LNG shipments is a Shell. It's Shell. So they are effectively the natural gas. When you think about natural gas getting sent around the world, Shell is at the, Shell is the base of that. And then bigger picture, also, we think that EVs that is going to continue to be a dominant trend. We believe the value is not investing in the electric vehicle manufacturer per se, but it's more to be invested in the lithium producer. And our biggest holding there in the ETF is SQM, and they're the second largest lithium producer in the world. So that's how we think about it. It's 2 tiers.
Okay, a couple of points to pick up on. Let me do nat gas first. I always find investing in nat gas, and Shell maybe is a much more stable way to play it, in a sense that so many of the companies, really get volatile and moved around by the price of nat gas, which is affected by seasonality and drawdowns, et cetera. So how do you dovetail that into your thinking and maybe not even worry about it?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Let's not worry about it. I think so. Shell is in a nice situation where it's LNG contracts, right? So it's not, in North America, we know about the volatility of natural gas. You get hit with a cold spell and all of a sudden this thing's up like 60%. Right? I think that when we think about that volatility, no one wants that.
No.
But longer term, you have to look through all of this and say, will we be demanding more natural gas 5 years from now or less? And the answer is significantly more. And when we think about the opportunities, specifically when we think about taking North American natural gas, which is very cheap in the global cost curve, sending that globally, that's where you want to be. And I think big picture on any commodities, it was one of our original head of research at TD Asset Management said to me very simply, and it's always stuck with me. The commodity game is a volatile game. Find me a commodity, find me a company that is where the demand for those end units is increasing or they're producing more. And that's ultimately, you want to be in a tailwind commodity, right? I don't want to be in I'm playing it for the cyclical bounce. I want to be in a structural growth.
And that's one of your key themes, right? Commodities of the future, and therefore lithium for you.
Exactly.
But I also feel lithium is such a volatile trade as well. And sometimes like people love it, love it, love it when Tesla's hot or what have you, and then they throw it out.
Yeah. So I think with lithium, it's a little more dynamic in the sense that there aren't that many global lithium resources that have been developed, right? And so it's not like turning on a switch. But what we do know is like the electric vehicle demand has been steady and it's been growing, and that right now lithium is at an incredible pinch point where there just simply isn't the resource. We're going to be in structural deficit out to the end of the decade. It just is a dynamic that is incredible. And SQM, you're looking at a stock that has a 3% dividend yield, trades on 16 times PE, and is half the multiple of its major competitor, and it has double the ROE. So we think that's an opportunity.
We'll leave it there. We'll be right back with Thomas George. Welcome back, everyone. Continuing the conversation with Thomas George in terms of really looking for, good growth companies of the future. And, Thomas, it's interesting. It's something that, was said to me a couple months ago when really before we even saw inflation peak up, was that, you don't want to hedge against inflation. You've got to outperform inflation, which means you really do need to be invested in these disruptive growth areas. That's one of the key reasons why I wanted to bring you to our viewers today, because it's thinking about what the future is going to look like. So I think that it's a really important conversation to have for people's portfolios. I mean, would you agree?
I would 100% agree, right? There's never been a time, obviously before you'd have these slow moving trains of consumer disruption, right? And it'd be, okay, Coke is kind of, Pepsi's eating a little bit of Coke's market share, and you come back to it a year later. We're living in a world where consumer adoption happens. It's happening at a viral rate, right? And that's really driven by the internet, driven by social media, and driven by digital trends, right? All of this is changing the dynamic of the consumer, and technology is the backbone of that. So we're looking at a world that is, to say it's fast paced, I think is an understatement, right? Disruption is the new norm, and that dynamic of always being in the fray and knowing what's happening and being at least, having that idea of having a hedge. Well, that 100% right. It's not about a hedge is kind of like a defensive bet. You need to be offensive. You need to be in the place where that demand is going. So a great example here is one of our top 5 holdings is Airbnb, right?
Oh,
I could own hotels, or I could own Airbnb. I'll tell you, I'll tell you who has a better hedge against inflation there. Full stop. Airbnb is a juggernaut, right? It's going to gobble up the world. The opportunity is just, we love companies like this where there is no number 2, there is no number 3. And, if anyone, and the network effects of Airbnb are just incredible.
Okay, well, so what? But look, obviously, Airbnb is now a proven concept, right? If you go back a few years ago, it's going to work. This is such an odd concept. Hotels are kind of maybe trying to get into that business as well, right? So, but why do you say it's going to be the number 1, and you'd rather invest in that than hotels? Like, what is it really about the concept that you love?
Oh, it's really opened up the market for, I call it predominantly experiences, right? And that's it. I think that's a term where people are like, what are you talking about? Well, no, when I travel, if I'm going to make the effort, do the COVID testing, do the yada, 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 I'm not going to be staying at the Holiday Inn for a couple of days or the Hilton. I think about it and I'm like, listen, and this is what the CEO of Airbnb was alluding to, people are staying longer, right? The definition, especially if you work from home, now I'm looking for a house that can house my kids, that has great internet, and all the amenities, and that dynamic of expanding the view of a vacation. It's something that itself is just such a disruptive concept, right? And and we're seeing so much more of the experience come into it. It just really is, it's one of those, again, it comes back to talk to anyone who's like, that does Airbnb regularly, super fans. I want to own companies where there are super fans, right? And I think that's a really clean seed, right? If you know, like everyone who owns an Apple product is effectively a super fan because their next purchase is always like an earbud or whatever. I got these things, it's always,
I got these.
It's like, and they've got me because I'm a super fan, whether I want to wear an Apple t-shirt or not. I'm not really going to go outside of the ecosystem. And so if you can find franchises that cultivate super fans, you found a gem. And I won't do that for Hilton. I won't do that.
What's wrong with Hilton? I'm still a hotel girl. But anyway, but I've only got 20 seconds, but you did allude to the fact that you think that they're going to be able to expand even more so. What's an example of that in 10 seconds?
Well, they're just still scratching the surface. Short-term rentals is a huge category. They're literally like, it's a massive total addressable market. Excess of trillion. The way we're going to look at rentals, the whole dynamic, you got to take yourself into a paradigm shift.
Okay. All right. We will take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have some more investment ideas in terms of disruptive growth with Thomas George and his ETF, Grizzle. Thomas, we talked a lot about, some of the areas that you find and think are, interesting from a disruptive perspective and where we need to be for growth and being on the offensive in terms of our investment portfolios for the next decade or so. One other area, though, that you've talked about to me is what we really think of big tech, the incumbent tech companies. Where do they stand in your conversations?
Yeah, so we're of the view that big tech is going to be as close to disruption and on the cutting edge of disruption, just like small companies, right? Like an upstart like Airbnb. And we think about it, right? You look at what Google has done. You look at the continued innovation out of Apple. These companies are in perhaps like one of the best setups, right? And you got network effects of what they're doing. So if you really limit yourself to say, I need these crazy companies, I need these real science experiment type of companies. And, because then people are going to be like, oh, that's real disruption, which is like, listen, you have to recognize that we're in the era of technology and the moats are significant for these companies and owning the right ones. I will caveat that, right? And it's still high stakes, right? Look at the market cap that's been evaporated at Facebook. I'm not saying it's easy walking, but I'm saying that the dynamic nature of owning a Microsoft, owning a Google, Google's one of our top 5 holders, owning a Visa, MasterCard, owning the rails of payments, they are still growing at incredible clips and they're going to be part of the future. And if that includes crypto for Visa and MasterCard, so be it.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, you can still stay with your big tech companies. They've got so much going on internally that we don't even know about, but that you're confident that they're going to be the disruptors as well.
They're going to be in the game. They're going to be actively participating to be a part of that disruptive force. And in many cases, they're going to be the consolidator, right? So even if you don't have to necessarily get all your nice small picks right, where you've got a big company that's thinking correctly and always is concerned about disruption. And the big companies that worry me the most are the ones that said, hands back. I'm sitting on a beach. We'll let the market come to us. It's not going to happen.
I hope nobody does that.
There are so many companies in the S&P. You listen to their conference calls. This used to be, and I'm just like, what's actually happening here with you guys? Like, you literally there's so much changing in the market, and just like let's get McKinsey here. Let's that.
In other words, let's hire a consultant. That's what you're saying.
Bingo.
Yeah, as opposed to figuring it out. Yeah.
And listen, not to rail on the consultants industry, but typically that's kind of listen, no one should know change more than internal your organization. But what happened in Peloton was very interesting. Actually, I agree with everything McKinsey did. They canned the CEO. They did everything that needed to be done at Peloton to right the ship. And Peloton's an interesting one, right? We were when it was IPO'd, we were short. We wrote the first short report on Peloton. We were like, listen, this is an iPad on a bike. We did the whole thing. And then obviously COVID came. We said, listen, all bets are off. This is a dynamic change. But we still knew the CEO was, this guy was a promoter. And, and we know promoters well in Canada, right? This is the land of promoters, right? I've spotted a promoter or two in my lifetime. I'm like, this guy's all, he's talking about total addressable market where everybody in the world can be on Peloton. But ultimately, we think there's still a value proposition here. So we ultimately bought the stock when we, when we launched the GRZZ ETF. So, we think about it dynamically.
Got it. Yeah. And you do have to be dynamic. And I'm going to let you end off on this. And also unbiased. And let's talk about that from an energy perspective. What do you say in terms of for energy, not for energy?
Yeah. So I think we're in the space right now. And I'm agnostic and I think everyone needs to take this view. You don't need to wear an oil patch flag. You don't need to wear a flag for electric vehicles. We need all of it, right? We can all come together at the energy buffet and have a good time. And so, energy independence, this is critical, right? And, we're seeing geopolitical tensions in Europe, Russia. When we talk about energy independence, North America, all of it is going to have its place. The oil sands, shale, electric vehicles, lithium, all of it. It's not going to be I want this, and you're not the kind I want, whether you're an oil advocate or whether you're an electric advocate.
Right.
We don't actually have time for that conversation. We have just give me all of it, and Grizzle will be invested in all of it.
Understood. We will leave it there. Thomas, great to see you. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot, Catherine.